Everybody, welcome to another episode of Chasing Collectibles Catchup. I'm Tyler, and today I'm taking another kind of moment of personal privilege to veer off from the typical comic book and nerd stuff. I guess we're talking about another nerd area in the area of Bob Dylan. So I'm a huge Beatles and Dylan fan, and last year I discovered a podcast. I was trying to search some Dylan podcasts because there's so many things to learn about him, and I discovered a podcast called the Dylanologist, and I had so much backlog, and it filled a lot of my time going on walks or being in the car or just doing stuff around the house, and brought me a lot of joy. And I thought, hey, one of the guys, Jens is out there, and I thought, hey, let's ask him if he'd like to come on the show. And I was uh, happy when he said yes. So we're here, and we're going to talk about Bob Dylan. So, Jens, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I mean, it's kind of nuts. I mean, we also, before you hit record, you mentioned just the podcast you do. I mean, Adam and I were just more similar. We like had a passion. We had a realization that there weren't a ton of active Dylan podcasts. So we were like, hey, let's just like do this thing. And
Right.
I don't know, we didn't know if anyone would ever listen. We had a small following already started because we both ran Bob Dylan fan pages, as we'll talk about in a few minutes, I'm sure. But like, it's just funny how it all kind of happened. None of it was really
Right.
planned. A lot of it just kind of on a whim, and it's cool how it all transpired, and the people we get to talk to, and the stuff that even happens behind the scenes that like didn't quite make it to fruition. And I don't know. It's a crazy
Yeah. No,
world, like
it's
none
it's
of which I
cool. Yeah.
expected, but it's fun.
No, I mean, I'm hyped. Like, I wouldn't have never thought that, like, and I know I don't know, to me, it's cool that, like, few months, I was kind of late to listening to the podcast, so there was a lot of backlog, and I just enjoyed listening to you guys chat. Now I'm like, hey, I'm talking to you now, which kind of shows
Yeah.
the coolness of the Dylan community too, where I can just,
Yeah.
hey, let's do this, and it worked out. So I'm super excited. Um, so how did you to kind of like start from the beginning? How did you get into Bob Dylan? Because I feel like it's not abnormal, but like for people our age, I mean, I feel like we're on the same ballpark age. It's,
Yeah.
it's not always the most common to hear. So how'd you get into Bob?
Yeah. Well, I'm 31, so I don't know if how ballpark that
I'm
is.
29, so we're about
Okay,
two
yeah,
years
right
apart.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean probably very much the same for you. I mean, I grew up in an era where it was very early internet. I remember the first YouTube videos, like
Right.
Charlie the Unicorn and I don't know, Charlie Bit Me. Everything had to do with Charlie
Yeah.
for some reason. And, like very soon thereafter, I was just in this, I think, formative period in my life, being in middle school, being a music fan, and at the time, primarily being into like what I would hear in video game soundtracks or what you'd get in movies and TV and whatever. But I was wanting to like branch out on my own. I finally had my own iPod, and it was
Yeah.
more than just like, a gigabyte and a half or whatever of storage, and I could fill up 160 gigabytes with what felt like an unlimited number of CDs. And I genuinely cannot recall like what the initial trigger was. Like if I saw a movie, if I saw a show, if I heard his song somewhere and would ask somebody like what the hell is playing. But what I do remember is like the local library. My brother and I would go there just about every Friday, and we would get just like armloads of CDs. Like anything that we were like, I recognize the name, I've heard of that, or someone
Right.
told me about this thing. And so I think somewhere along the way, I picked up a Bob Dylan album, and I would always play at least once, like each CD to hear, like, do I actually like this, or is it just something that someone told me I should like? And I remember it was Bob Dylan's Greatest Hits Volume One. So not even like an album, it's just like a
Yeah.
compilation, and just like it was as if I had heard "Blowing in the Wind" 1,000 times, and maybe I had subliminally
Yeah.
somewhere. But there was just this like instant awe of like, what is this? And it was captivating. And like I listened to the rest of it and I was like, okay, I need to know like what this guy's deal is and what are his other albums. And
Don't we all?
I think yeah, exactly. And I think the way it started was like, what albums are these songs from? Is I
Mhm.
think how I first got into him. So it was like that is primarily like 60, 3 to 67, give or take. So it covers, Freewheelin' to Blonde on Blonde, more or less, which
Yeah.
is, I think, for most people, the quintessential Bob. It's probably the most popular era. Um, and it's just like I went back to the library, I got each CD that I could, and then just, man, I started down these crazy rabbit holes. And like I said, with like YouTube and Wikipedia and other fan forums, things like Expecting Rain and I don't even remember all the places that I was going because again, this was like '06, maybe 2005, 6, 7, like in that time period and earlier mid-era internet, but still like antiquated enough that it wasn't like what we have now. You know, there's no
Right.
Instagram or Twitter or TikTok or anything to necessarily even find fandom. And so I was left just like, who is this old weird dude with this crazy voice who like
Yeah.
across every album seems to change style and appearance and I think that was just like the initial appeal, just that enigma, that captivating presence
Yeah.
of like who is this guy? I want to know
Yeah.
more. That's sort of what drew me in.
For real. And I kind of like had a relatively early exposure to him too. Like I was in high school and my mom, I always liked kind of like more 60s, 70s music. And my for graduation, my mom got me this collection called the Woodstock collection. And it had a
Mm,
whole bunch of people that would come to like in other ways as well. Like it had Donovan, it had Yusuf Islam. It had so many people on there. But like had Dylan and had two Dylan songs and it had also Mr. Tambourine Man, but it was the Birds cover. And I was like, huh, what
okay.
is this? And then I started getting more into the Beatles. But then as I'm looking into the Beatles, I'm like, well, they keep on mentioning Dylan. Like they really like Dylan. And George really, really likes Dylan. And then
Yep.
I'm like, well, who is this guy? And then that's what kind of led me into Dylan. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like he's come to be like my favorite, I guess I call him my favorite solo artist. You know, I kind of put the Beatles in their own category. And
Yep.
Dylan is just like, I don't know, like there's so much to learn about him. And even now, like I feel like I still there's so much I haven't learned and want to learn. And it's
Same.
yeah, which is crazy for you because you're like, you're a Dylanologist, which, this is too niche, but like funny how some people might argue what is a Dylanologist. But like you spend a lot of time, learning about him, and there's always more to learn about him.
Totally. And yeah, it's funny. Like my former co-host, the podcast is on hiatus as he's a dad and is busy working and all that. But anytime I would talk to him, like I remember when we
Mhm.
first connected over Instagram and we started talking, I'm just like blown away by this
Mhm.
dude's knowledge. Like he,
Yeah.
I would sometimes, share a photo and miscredit either a photographer or perhaps
Mhm.
where it took place. Cause like not, I mean, I'm sourcing things from the internet and books and not everything is always 100% accurate. Even I
Yeah.
don't know everything. The internet doesn't know everything, but Adam would be like, oh no, actually that's from this. Or like he played
Right.
this, he wore this outfit at this concert in this year at this venue. And I'm
Yeah.
like, bro, like, how do you know
Right.
that?
Well, I
So it
remember
is funny,
on
like
the
the depth of knowledge that different
yeah.
fans have.
Well, I remember there were some episodes on the podcast where we'd ask him like, "Oh, what's your favorite concert live performance from this period to this period?" It's like, "Oh, probably October such and such at this city." I was like, "What?" Like, how do you? Which is so
Exactly.
impressive. It's insane.
It's nuts. But I mean, to
Do
your
you,
point of like, what is a Dylanologist? That was something that I think we talked about a lot, both on and off air. I know that there are like in academic circles, where there are people that like do this for their job somehow. Like that's
I
kind of
mean,
like Adam and I.
there's a you can get so many books on him. So,
Exactly. It's like that was kind of our dream is like, how do we make this like how can we be Bob Dylan people full time or whatever? Um, but like yeah, sorry, to backtrack is just to say like the idea of a Dylanologist and like what that is, like those in the academic community, like they sort of see it as sort of that, like an academic thing, like somebody who studies in higher education and maybe is doing like a thesis work or doing archival work. But I mean, like quite literally at their etymological core. I mean, we're talking about Dylan and then like the study of. And I
yeah,
don't think you need to be an academic. You can be somebody
right.
sitting, in your living room or somebody who's riding the bus to school and like learning about and studying something.
Yeah,
And that's sort of how it like came to me. I mean, when I created my first like fan page, which maybe is a funny thing to talk about very briefly, like when I created my first fan page, like Bob didn't even have an account on Instagram.
yeah,
This was like 2017. I remember like I had spurts every now and then back then. I discovered him as a kid. I was obsessed. He's always been my favorite artist, but he sometimes I overdo it. Like I
yeah.
oversaturate
It kind of
Dylan, so
comes
he
in
takes like a
waves,
back
and
seat.
yeah,
Yeah. So like 2017, or I guess before 2017 had kind of been like that. I had had that like lull in my like active appreciation, but like he had come back around and I was listening to albums I hadn't listened to and realized that like weird, there's no Bob Dylan page on Instagram. And you'd see a couple of weird, what felt like bot fan pages or something.
yeah,
So I was like, maybe I'll just create something. Plus it's that like thing of embarrassment, and I hadn't yet created any shit posting accounts of my own, but like I didn't want to use my official, like my personal with all my friends
Right.
and family and like talk about Bob Dylan and be that nerd. So it was sort of easy to have the anonymity. Um, so that's like again 2017. It's crazy to think that that was going on 10 years ago, and I used it to like varying degrees in the early days, but I think 2021, 2022 started using it again more actively, and that was sort of the start of like what has ultimately led to where we are today.
Yeah, and I recommend too. I know you're not posting as actively right now, but I mean, even just like to scroll through your prior posts. I mean, it's so cool seeing like we talked about. There's so many things you can post about Dylan. I mean, the different eras, the different. This is one of my favorite shirts, by the way. I gotta look on
It's
Twitter
dope.
because someone got me someone made this design, and I was like, oh, I gotta have this.
That's
But I mean,
cool.
so many eras of the guy, so many songs. I mean, there's so many photographs. I mean, it's just impressive. All that you posted with him.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean there is a lot, and it's funny because at first like trying to think of like, yeah, how do you synthesize this person or this idea? Like, it literally at first was just like, what photos do I like? And so I would
Yeah.
post the photo with like the context of, maybe when or where and who was in the photo or whatever. But then the deeper you go, the more that you
Hmm.
interact in the community, the more that you start to realize it's like, oh, you could like literally try to track an entire tour. Like he's that
Right.
photographed, like there's that much in-depth information out there that you can almost like concert by concert post if you
Yeah.
wanted. And then, I mean, that's not even to say anything of like all the other types of accounts that are out there.
Yeah.
I mean, you have like art and fan pages that are doing like, their own illustrations and their own artistic representations. I think of like Sergeant Celestial as an example, sort of. I know they do a lot of like Beatles stuff too.
Mhm.
But that was always like a cool thing that drew me in. And the people that do like, I don't know how, again, it's like their full-time job to follow Bob on tour somehow and then
Yeah. Oh
like
my.
post about it. And
Yeah.
like, how do you get that gig?
And I know, right? I mean, I saw him Monday night, which I mean, we
Mm,
can talk about seeing him live too.
yeah.
But I mean, immediately after, there's people that are posting, "Oh, here's the set list." And it's like, well, I mean, it's just so impressive how much of a following he has.
Yeah.
I mean, not that, I mean, I know he's very famous, very influential, but it's just cool the community that's built around him as well.
Hmm.
I did want to add, and this is a thing you hear a lot about Dylan with his voice. I play him up for my students, and sometimes my students like him. Other times they're like what about it? Like they mention his voice, and I'll generally tell my colleagues, I'm like, I like his cover. I like not his cover. I like his version of "Make You Feel My Love" more than Adele's, and they think I'm like it's a bit. I'm like, no, it's not. Like I think it has
Yeah.
more heart. And I guess how do you respond when if anyone ever gives you like a hard time about the voice? Because I generally think it's good. And like I'm not being ironic, you know?
Yeah, no, no, I totally get it. It's funny that that's one of the first questions most people have, or at least one of the
Yeah,
first comments they'll make is like, I know him, or like I respect him, but I can't get over the voice, or like how he
right.
sounds. And yeah, I think well, I will say on the one hand, I've noticed in my life, like the more that I've spent time with music and like the music that I love and appreciate, the more that I find that I, for some reason, do gravitate to people that sound what I'm just going to call more natural. So like who sing in a way that sounds more authentic. It's not auto-tuned. It's not even someone who has like a classically trained voice who sings beautifully. Like I don't have a problem with that, but there's almost so much perfection and like so much refinement in the craft that like to my ears it's I like something more fluid in the middle, something that's not so like polished and
Right.
pristine. So it's like I gravitate towards bands like Big Thief, or like Adrian Lenker's solo stuff, or even like Buck Meek from Big Thief. Like
Yeah.
there's something about people with these like strange and unique cadences and affectations, and just the way that they sing, communicate, talk, or otherwise. And so I think on the one hand, I recognize that that's true of me. I think that's true of a lot of people. But yeah, if you're somebody who's like, how do you get over the voice? I mean, there's again that reality that you just might not. Like if you don't
Right.
like that sort of thing, you
Yeah.
might not like it. But
Hmm.
what I've come to appreciate and realize is like how much of Bob Dylan is like the man and how much is like
Yeah.
a persona, or how much is like a
Yeah.
myth that he's both built but he's also sort of like navigated the cultural myth that builds up around a person who's so reclusive and secretive and who builds his own myth in
Right.
in unison with like the cultural myth. So it's like I don't think that what you see on stage or what you hear on record necessarily is like Dylan as the guy as he's just like hanging out in his living room. If he ever even does that, it seems like he's always on the
Right.
road. But he's somebody who recognizes that like music is more than just performance. Like I think he puts on whether it's masks, whether it's personas, whether it's whatever word you want to substitute for it. But there's no other way to explain the guy that goes from like early 60s, beatnik troubadour, like folky protest singer to the electric rock icon of, the mid 60s to then very soon thereafter being like farm slender chic, like putting on
Yeah.
a little bit of weight again after maybe some like drug issues and being a dad and having a wife and being on the farm and all that. Like he goes like so quickly through these iterations and these even like vocal changes. Like to listen
In like Nashville
to
skyline, he sounds almost unrecognizable, you know?
exactly. Like I think often about if you were just a casual fan and back in the day, like you heard about Dylan, maybe you had heard if you had heard like a Rolling Stone on the radio or maybe Blowing in the Wind, and then like you hear that he has a new album and Johnny Cash is playing on it or something, you put it on the table and what you
Yeah.
hear is Dylan
Like what?
crooning in like this weird country voice. Like you were probably
Yeah.
like, wait a minute, is this playing at the right speed? Is this the right
Hmm.
album? Like we take for granted streaming and just, the way that we think about music in the world today. But all that is to say, like Dylan is this artist, I think, first and foremost, and that applies to not just like the music, but it applies to like the way he sings, the way he dresses, the way that he puts on hats and makeup and wigs and
Yeah.
like all the various things he's done. And like you said earlier, the photos that you can post about, like it's almost as if he's built Bob Dylan, not
Yeah.
Robert Zimmerman as he was born, but like Bob Dylan is the art if
Right,
that makes
exactly.
sense.
No, for sure. And it's just, I mean, even like you talked about, like if you're a casual fan in the '60s and you heard of him, then you listen to other stuff. I imagine it must be so strange for someone who like maybe you're like because there are certain people like if you like music and like well I should see Bob Dylan's coming to town. I know he's significant. I should see him. And you have no preparation. And if you go to that show, you're going to be like, what is happening right now? Because there's no hits. And then if there is one, like the other day you played All Along the Watchtower, it is not going to be what you heard. And he's also not going to really acknowledge you the entire time. There's no crowd work, and it's just I loved it.
Yep.
Monday night, but
He
I'm
might
like,
hide behind a piano and you barely see him.
right. He might wear a hood, um, and it's so fascinating, kind of the mythos that he's built around himself.
Totally. And sometimes I wonder like how much of it's intentional and how much of
Mhm.
it does just turn into like initially there probably was a very clear divide between like Robert Zimmerman and Bob Dylan, but I wonder if over time if the myth sort of overtook the man a little bit and maybe even in some ways in bad ways. I mean, that's the thing
Yeah,
that I think Adam and I were getting towards, we hadn't yet done, but something we talked a lot about was like the ways in which even our heroes are not always or exclusively the good guy. I mean, like nobody is exclusively good all the time or makes all the
right.
right decisions all the time. And so but it's ironic to to juxtapose somebody like Bob Dylan, who's seen as like cultural, or I should say countercultural, like bastion of the early 60s. Like most people think of Bob Dylan, they think of early folk and protest music, and to counter that with perhaps like his Christian era. Like I think there a lot
Right.
of people
Yeah.
would see a stark divide between like political activist and like born again Christian. Like what's
Yeah.
that about? How did you get there so quickly? And so there's I don't know, there's complexity, there's nuance, and there's good and bad that are held in tension, but I think that again plays into the myth, that plays into the art, and I think how you navigate that.
Yeah. Well, then there's even in, I don't know if we should go in this rabbit hole because this could take us an hour, but like I've listened to like the Definitely Dylan podcast and they've talked about recently, like, are there things that artists owe the fans? There are different
Oh
artists who are
yeah.
like more legacy artists about, if you go to Paul McCartney show, I went to one in November and like he's got a system, he's going to play Hey Jude exactly how Hey Jude is going to be played. You know,
Yeah.
if Paul played Hey Jude in this maybe like a jazzy kind of darker way, you'd be like, "What are you doing, Paul?" But like with Dylan, you know, Dylan's got kind of like he's kind of built up this reputation that, no, you're gonna see something else at my show. And, maybe if you want to hear Mr. Tambourine Man, maybe that's kind of like disappointing for you, but like is it what you want? Is it what he wants? Is it a mix?
Yeah.
It's interesting.
No, that is a good point. And I mean, literally, you will see that on Instagram. You'll see that on Reddit threads when people are like, taking my kid to Dylan for the first time, or I'm going to Dylan for
Yeah.
the first time. What should I expect? I mean, on the one hand, I'm glad that people are asking, but
Yeah.
that is a challenge, and it's one that I think I'm wearing a Haley Williams shirt. That was not clear or obvious, I'm sure, based on my seated angle. But I went to one of Haley Williams's shows in Minneapolis the other night, um, which was super, super dope, super cool. I love Haley Williams. I love Paramore, everything that they're doing. But I say that to say, like, the show was very much like you would expect it to sound. It's not like Haley performed these songs in some deep or unusual or different way
Mm.
from how they sound on the record. Like it's still like a different experience, and it's like one that the fans want. So to contrast that with somebody like Dylan, somebody who never, for that fact, has really
Yeah.
played his songs how they sound on record. Even when he's in the studio,
Right.
he isn't playing them consistently the same every time. That's how you get variations, like for example, of like a Rolling Stone, where the first iteration is like a 3/4 waltz. I don't think that would have sold nearly as well as like the
No, not
rockier
enough.
version with Al Cooper's organ. So it's like Dylan has never been the type of artist, and I think that's a distinguisher that needs to be made, is that just that like different types of musicians and different types of artists exist. And so there are going to be, by and large, most of the time, the type of musicians and artists who are going to play their songs predominantly the same way that they've always been played and the way they've always been heard. Um, Not just to please the fans necessarily, but I think that's just like the
They enjoy it. Like
natural way of thinking about music.
yeah, I don't think McCartney's doing it like, oh, I better play Hey Jude again. Like I think he loves doing it. I think he has a good time. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, and he does at the same time want the fan to be happy. And I think Dylan and other artists like him, I can think of others too, but like Dylan specifically seems to be the high mark and the pinnacle of this, or maybe even like the formula or the whatever. Like this is who you look to emulate when you're
Yeah.
trying to be an artist who isn't confined to, and I guess Adam and I talked about this too a lot, is just that like Dylan very well could have been like McCartney, could have been like, I'm gonna lean into the folk protest or electric shtick my entire career and make a lot of money doing so, but like what is that
Yeah.
gonna mean for me in my artistic integrity? And everybody sort of
Right.
has to land at their own answer. But I
Yeah.
think for Dylan, like from day one, he was performing his songs the way that felt most natural, the way that he thought that they should sound in their moment and in their context. And I love to see songs like One Too Many Mornings with what feels like 17 different iterations from like those. That's one of the songs, for example, that's carried through from its earliest conception on record all the way to modern day performances. But when you've been performing for 60 years and changing styles as often as you do, like you play that song 1,000 different
Yeah.
ways, like literally. It's not just that you played
Yeah.
some notes slightly different, but it's like you changed arrangements, and
Mhm.
All Along the Watchtower doesn't sound like Jimmy's version, and it doesn't sound like the one you put down on John Wesley Harding. And
Yeah.
so I think to the fan who might be casual, or to the person who's like trying to understand Dylan and all that he entails, I think that is just like essential to understand, is that Dylan is a subversive artist. He's one that doesn't follow suit or take after the trends of what everybody else is doing, but is seemingly, at least for the most part, always been trying to blaze his own trail and do his own thing, even when it's been commercially not beneficial. To do
Right.
Christian rock again, to
Yes.
do his 80s output, even some of his
Yeah.
like 90s output, like he sometimes chooses like to leave
Christmas
songs
album.
like Blind Willie McTell off of an album, and yeah, like to make a Christmas album. Like I don't think he always even makes the best choices. I, I'm not Bob
Yeah.
Dylan. I don't know what he thinks when
Yeah.
he's
Exactly.
compiling, his track list or whatever. But that's I think what in summation, I think that's just what makes him all that much more interesting, all that much more intriguing, is like knowing when you go see him the next time you see him, it's not going to be the same. Why would you
Right.
want to see the same person over and over and over and over again, unless maybe you only wanted to see the person the one time? But it's
Yeah.
like Dylan gives his fans the thing that I like you almost can't replace, and that's a different show, even if the set's similar. Like you're getting a different show every night.
Yeah. And I don't think, there's a, and I can link, I guess I'll link the podcast, but they even talked about like, in the Definitely Dylan podcast, like he's, I think he wants to give people a good show. Like, I don't think he's like, oh, screw the fans, because obviously
Yeah.
but he's going to do it in a different way, like you said. Um, so I want to, because I think if I want to try to do some Dylan questions, and I'm going to try to be
Cool.
as rapid fire as I can with these, because I think we could do a whole, probably hour and a half on some of these. Um, so what is your favorite of the Dylan greatest hits? Like of a song normies would know. Like if you told someone on the street this song, they'd be like, "Oh, I kind of know I know what that is." So what's your favorite normie song or greatest hit
I,
song?
I Yeah, I think it's a normie song. I mean, I would say All Along the Watchtower. I
Yeah.
think that like up there with like a Rolling Stone might be one of his most iconic, even if you don't know that it is originally him. I think most people at least know Jimmy's. But
Hmm.
like when I've said that before, people would be like, "Well, isn't that Jimi Hendrix song?" It's like, no, Dylan wrote it. Like Jimmy loved it that much and,
Yeah.
made it all that much better. But it's one of my favorite songs just ever, not only
Right.
Dylan.
One of my favorite bits to do with people is I'll like if they like say like a song name, I'll be like, that was like a Dylan song first. Like they'll say something like espresso with Sabrina Carpenter, like,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
that's a cover, like that's Dylan. And they're like, what? It's like no, like that's not actually Dylan.
Yeah,
Personally, I love Mr. Tambourine Man. I just love like the imagery that it invokes. It's a
yeah.
very like kind of relaxed song. So I enjoyed that one quite a lot. Um, and feel like you can't go too wrong with times there are changing is inspiring, and
Hmm.
especially like I try to avoid politics on this podcast, but just contextually,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
yeah.
The times always do be changing. They are always
They do
crazy.
be changing. What about a Dylan song or album you recommend for someone trying to get in more into him? So rather than like a greatest hits, which I think is a good gateway drug, what is like
Yeah.
a an album like, oh, listen to this front to back and you'd have a good time?
Yeah, it's really hard because if it's a band like the Beatles, whom I also love and respect and are probably my number two behind Dylan, they have like 10 years of output. And so like
Yeah.
even if I say one album and even though there's a lot of diversity, it seems easier to do. But like
You can
the
say more
the
than one. You can say
same
more than one. I don't want to trap you.
no. It's to say that like even the 60s for Dylan, his evolutions and changes are so different and complex
Mm,
that it's hard to like even if I was to only focus on the 60s, like 62 to 69, what I would pick. And I want to say something like Blonde on Blonde because that's my
yeah.
favorite album ever, but I don't know if it's as accessible as something like Highway 61
Mhm.
Revisited. Like
Right.
obviously it has like a Rolling Stone which is like one of his most iconic songs, but it also ends with what I think is maybe one of his best songs, Desolation Row. Like for as much as it's talked about, I don't think it's talked about enough. Like it's
Yeah.
so long, it's so good. The lyrics are also like mysterious and mystical and sort of probably have some truth buried beneath all the, the characters and allegory, but I think Highway 61 is my answer.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good. I mean, there's this, like I said, there's just enough of like there's songs people would recognize, and then there's some new stuff that I think people would enjoy.
Yeah.
Um, I like bringing it all back home. If I had some albums up in my classroom, and I'll play them for my students, and that's one that one and Highway, the revisited, I'll play for them, and because I think like it's just enough where I think students would appreciate it. I have not tried playing Rough and Rowdy Ways for them just yet. There
No,
is
I get
one I
that.
did actually play for my seniors because I teach freshmen and seniors. One day I mentioned like, oh, Bob Dylan has a 16-minute long song about the JFK assassination. So last year they took U.S. history, and they're like, really? I was like, yeah. I said, I'll play it for you guys if you want to. And it was just kind of interesting. Like we're just in a classroom setting, they're working on stuff, but in the background you're just hearing, you know, murder most
Murder most
foul. I was like,
foul.
yeah,
I love that.
yeah. I was like, Prince, like this would be a weird moment for my boss to walk in. Um,
Right.
What about so speaking of less known Dylan songs, what is a favorite lesser known Dylan song? And I know there's so many, but you could say a couple if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, Let Me Die in My Footsteps is the one that immediately comes to mind because I've been listening to it on repeat this year. For those who are unfamiliar, it's a alternate no, not alternate take, sorry. It's an outtake from the Freewheelin' Bob Dylan, which is the album, his second studio album that, catapulted him to national and I think worldwide fame.
That's that
And
iconic like, cover, the iconic,
yep,
hands in the pockets, right, walking down in Greenwich Village. Yeah,
exactly. Well, we are blessed in our modern era to have access to such vinyl records as you can kind of see behind me. But one of which is like if you're in the know of like Record Store Day, um, they released what was called the original version of Freewheelin' because there initially when Bob Dylan was going to release the album, there were four songs on the album that were like removed and replaced with four different songs. So essentially there's like OG version, or sorry, OG version, like the one that like didn't ever get released, and then there's like the official that we know and love and everyone
right.
should listen to. But the one that was initially supposed to be released had this song, Let Me Die in My Footsteps, and it was otherwise not really a well-known song until I think like the early 90s when Dylan started issuing his bootleg series. But it's just, I mean, talk about like politically and culturally relevant, talk about just like on par with Hard Rain and Blowing in the Wind and the other folk protest songs. But this one I think has a power all its own, and I think he only ever played it the one time, which is
Wow.
also mind-blowing. Like anytime I learned that Dylan has only played a song one time, I often wonder like why? Like this song is
Yeah,
so good. How could you have only stopped after this one take? But
yeah,
that's my long-winded answer.
yeah, and it's crazy too, like because you can do a deep dive into bootlegs and like what was left off albums, and like a song of that caliber being left off the album is just craziness when you think
It's
about it.
nuts.
Um, I quite enjoy, and I know this isn't it's probably a more popular of the non-normie songs, but I just love Changing of the Guard.
Hmm.
I go on runs a lot, and like I'm kind of weird with I don't have a running playlist, just whatever songs are on my Spotify is what I play. And like whenever I'm changing the guard comes on, I feel myself I don't know running faster. And I never finish like I finished the whole thing. I never like ended early. I just love the
Yep.
vibes. And it's amazing. I love it. It's just one of my all-time favorites. I've also recently added a series of dreams to my kind
Hmm.
of running playlist, and I just like that one a lot. And it just goes to show there's so many songs that kind of left off of the I guess the cutting board floor that didn't make it.
Yeah. I love to think, I do a lot of walking. I don't do a ton of running, but like I'm out and about often, and I see people running or doing other things with headphones, and I'm often wondering, like, what are you listening to? So I'm glad to know
Yeah.
that there are some people out there listening to Bob Dylan on
But
their
yeah,
runs. That's
when I'm
hilarious.
running, I am like out of breath. I'm changing the guards blasting or whatever. I could
Love
not like
that.
I won't listen to like I couldn't listen to like like we mentioned earlier, Murder Most Foul. Like that's not a running song.
Sure. No.
Well, so speaking of non-running songs, what do you think? And I think you and Adam talked about this once. What is Dylan's like saddest song? Like would definitely get you in the feels anytime.
Man, yeah, saddest in that regard is like, oh
Because there's a few. I've got two written down, but I'm
man.
curious
Okay.
what you think.
I purposely didn't think very hard about this because I
Yeah,
wanted to see what would
I
come up in the moment, and I'm mad
right.
that like nothing is immediately coming to mind that's like really good. I mean, like Sarah came to mind as like a
Yeah,
sad song, but like for a different reason, not like sad in like an emotional sense, but just sad in like a relational sense, like sad that
yeah,
like people have messy situations and get divorced and
mhm,
are hurt, and that sometimes those grievances are aired in songs that we listen to 50 years
right.
later. So it's like it's a different kind of sad. Um, but if I'm thinking of just like other pure, I'm trying to look. I keep my entire Dylan record collection in a different room, and so I'm trying to look at like I have some bootlegs out here, I have some other stuff, and like trying to see what comes to mind. I don't know, like Blood on the Tracks, even just as an album, is pretty sad. Similarly
Yeah.
for Why Sarah as a song is sad, but I don't know. I'm curious to hear what yours are. Maybe that'll spark
So
something.
well, my initial thought, I tried to avoid this one because I know it's just the vibes are enough. Like not dark yet, obviously. I mean,
Mm,
my
yeah,
soul is
that's
turned into
true.
steel, but I tried to avoid that one. I think you guys talked about this one once, most of the time being particularly sad because like
Mm-hmm.
every single like it's juxtaposed where like, he's mentioning like, oh, I don't think about her anymore. I don't most of the time, but then it's like most of the time. So it's like implying that, he's still no matter what can't move on. Like I think that's pretty sad. And
Yeah.
then just objectively, I guess tragic, I think, is the lonesome death of Hattie Carroll. For I guess for people that don't know, because times of the era change is kind of like the go and blown in the wind or the go to like, oh, those are his like civil rights historic ones. But the lonesome death of Hattie Carroll, is a story about a man who, killed a person of color in the South. He gets convicted and then he only gets 6 months in prison. And this song kind of immortalized both Hattie Carroll and the guy. This is a book
That's
my wife
true.
got me, I think last year,
Oh,
the year before. It's a good one. And they talk about how the guy, he died in 2009, William Zanzinger, but like the rest of his life, he couldn't stand Dylan because he kind of ruined his life,
understandably.
hey, kind of a life that kind of deserves to be, I
You reap
don't
what you
want to say
sow
ruined.
sometimes.
I'm not beyond, I
Yeah,
don't think people are beyond redemption, but I'm like, hey,
totally.
you did a horrible thing.
It's like
So,
actions have consequences sometimes.
right. So that one's pretty sad.
And you did spark one, and it's from the times era changing. I legitimately think that North Country Blues is one of Dylan's saddest songs, and
Yeah.
I love that he sings it like from the female perspective too, which is like another thing of Dylan that's often kind of interesting is like the perspectives of which he chooses to sing, whether a
Right.
cover like House of the Rising Sun, which he keeps in the feminine, unlike a lot of male artists that change it to like a more masculine. But there's just something about the way that that song ends, which is death and suicide and,
Yeah.
very sad things as a result of like systemic
Mhm.
issues in a place where people are just trying to live. So that's the thing about Dylan. He's always going to be culturally relevant because these things are always culturally relevant, as much as we
Yeah.
may not want to talk about them or as uncomfortable as they might be. Like that's part of why I think Dylan's saying what he's saying. Like ultimately, at the end of the day, he felt like these things need to be said, they need to be put out into the world. And I often, like, I think naively think that we've come far enough that maybe we're past such things, but I think in fact we are not. Masters of War is still relevant,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah. That's without getting deeper. I mean, there's so many
Yeah.
songs I think keep Dylan relevant every so
Yeah.
often. And it's just, you would hope you moved on, but Um, to kind of go a little bit further here, what about a favorite Dylan era, like that you
Hmm.
gravitate toward?
Historically, I would just say like the 60s. And that's the folk that everyone's gonna know, the electric that everyone's gonna know. It's his most iconic, I think. Running it's interesting running a like a Bob Dylan fan page and posting photos from all of his various eras and seeing which photos perform the best, which
Yeah,
ones get the most engagement. Not that that's not what I was striving for, but it was just interesting to see, like,
right.
okay, when I post Dylan in 66 compared to 96, there's a big difference in like people that obviously, like, as algorithms do, are going to show different things to different people or whatever. But
Right.
the 60s are always what broke through. So that's historically my answer, but I'm gonna be a little bit counterculture, and I'm actually gonna say his early 90s, weirdly enough. Like I've been very into like, coming out of the 80s, a decade in which he was not very commercially or otherwise successful. I mean, he had a good few tours and all, and I think he maintained some success with his like devoted hardcore fans, but
Mm.
like by and large, his career was kind of in the tanker, and he put out "Oh Mercy" at the end of the '80s, which did have, I think, a reviving effect, only to then go back into the studio and record some pretty like what were seen as otherwise silly
Yeah.
albums with songs like "Wiggle Wiggle," and
Yeah.
some early uh like he sort of went back to his early form in recording just solo acoustic in his voice, but they were all covers of like old blues songs and
Right.
other standards that you'd hear elsewhere. But there's just something about like somebody who's perhaps, like down on their luck, or somebody even like Bob Dylan, as great and mythic as he is, like had eras in which he struggled, in which he was maybe perhaps even like having a difficulty discovering or deciphering identity, and like you move from the 60s and the 70s into the 80s, even just like musically, sonically, the ways in which that's different. Then you consider like what might be happening in his personal life, and just all of this is to say like you get older, you have more life experience, you sort of roll with the punches because that's all really any of us can do. And so Dylan, I think, in the early 90s, in returning to like World Gone Wrong and Good As I've Been to You, these two albums that are just again him and his guitar in his garage playing these old covers. He's like getting back to like his roots. He's getting back to like what birthed Bob Dylan, so to speak.
Yeah.
He's getting back to um what he loved about music. And I think that in that, as much as like critics might have, derided it or whatever, like I think he got back to who he was and what he was about and what he wanted to do. And what's the next thing he does? Fucking Time Out of Mind. Like one of the
Yeah.
craziest,
Mate.
like one of the
Yeah.
best, darkest, moodiest, grandiose albums that anyone has ever released, especially that late in their career after having, struggled for so long. And so I find myself, not that I'm anywhere near where Dylan was in the early 90s or anything, but like I can resonate with sort of like feeling frustrated, feeling stuck, feeling like, where do I go? Um, and so that era I've been listening to a lot, I've been thinking about a lot. So that's my answer is right now my favorite era is his
Yeah.
90s era.
Is that, and I struggle with my timeline sometimes. So when was the MTV? Was that around that time as well? Or is that a little
Yeah,
bit
that
later?
was 93 or 4. I don't remember the
Okay.
exact year, but it was like in between these two albums that were acoustic covers and his ultimate comeback. So I
Yeah.
think that played a part as well, at least getting his name back out there.
Right. Um, Personally, I find the aesthetics of the Rolling Thunder tour just really cool. I've actually for Spirit
Yes.
Week dressed up as him from Rolling Thunder. I didn't do the white face paint because my wife was like, I think that'd be a little weird. I was like, okay, fine. But she helped me with the hat and everything, and
Yeah.
it's just like the way he's like screaming his songs. It's just kind of fun. That's one of my favorite of the bootleg albums. I think it's Volume 5, if I remember correctly. But
Yep.
that's a fun era even though a lot's going on in
That's
his life at the time.
yeah, totally. And that's what's crazy. And that is one of my favorites too. And that's actually probably what does the best on social media after his 60s is like Rolling Thunder. Everyone loves what he's doing on that tour.
Yeah. Last kind of rapid fire question. What is your favorite like weird Dylan moment?
I'm gonna say the Grammys for Time Out of Mind. If you don't know, he's playing oh God, what song is it? He's playing Lovesick, maybe?
Mhm.
I think he's playing Lovesick, and a fan comes running onto the stage, or someone comes running onto the
Yeah.
stage with their shirt off and the words soy bomb um painted on their chest, and it's like an activist thing ultimately, but like nobody knew what was going on
Weird.
because the dude just rushed the stage. So production thinks, oh, well,
What's
Dylan's a
Dylan
weirdo,
up
this
to?
must be part of his act.
Yeah.
Dylan meanwhile is like, like what's going on here? He
Yeah.
keeps playing but is like obviously uncomfortable, and then I think
Mhm.
everybody realizes like, wait a minute, this guy's not
Yeah.
supposed to be dancing on the middle of the stage right now. And so they escort him away, and then Dylan just rips into like the gnarliest guitar solo I've ever seen him play. So that, like, bar
Yeah. It's
none,
bizarre.
just like on live TV. Like I didn't see it live. I was like 3 or whatever, but like I
Yeah.
watch it so many times on YouTube.
Yeah. I would say the because you how we're contrasting artists like McCartney and Dylan. McCartney is like someone who's been on every late night show. He's done the carpool karaoke. Dylan, I think, would hate that kind of sort of thing.
He
But
was on
like,
Pawn Stars though.
well, that's what I was going
Can't
to get to. He
forget.
was in Pawn Stars. I think that's such a strange thing. Like, I wonder if he just watched the show in his spare time. I was like, I'd like to do that. And
Right?
he made this very strange but funny cameo on Pawn Stars, and he was there for, it was like a 10-second cameo, and it's just hilarious that that's the thing he chose to be on. Not, he doesn't go on Fallon or Kimmel or even, anyone like that. He's like, no, I'm gonna do Pawn Stars.
Of all the shows. Yeah, it makes you wonder. Like, I genuinely think that he's just somebody who does what he wants to do. And that
Mhm.
in and of itself, I think is like an admirable like quality to be
Yeah.
so like authentically oneself, which is funny to say for somebody who builds their own myth around themselves. But you know what I mean? Like to at least be able to freely build said myth,
Mhm.
um, I think is something that's pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so we've talked a lot about Dylan. I do also want to talk about like we've talked a little bit off uh camera that you are looking at like trying to open up your own record store, which is so cool, and I'm really happy for you because I know you love records, you're huge into music, and I think like you could definitely like spread that love to other
Yeah.
people. So how's everything going with that?
Yeah, it's going well. It's kind of crazy. Like saying it feels like not real, and it still very much isn't. Like there's still a lot that needs to get figured out. There's a lot that like logistically just has not even
Mhm.
been formulated yet. But it's sort of like, yeah, I do love music. I've always loved music. I've always collected music, whether it was CDs or records or MP3s on an iPod for a long time. I just naturally like wanted to do something with it. I just didn't know how, whether it was because
Mhm.
of resources or just like where I was in life. But I've sort of reached my point in corporate world and corporate life where I'm like, I can't do this, like especially for the rest of my life. And I want to do something where much like Dylan, my, favorite artist, like I sort of want to be the author of my own path, so to speak. And I mean that to speak to even to like let me die in my footsteps. Like the whole point of that song is like I don't want to be told what to do. I don't want to like go hide in a bunker. Like if I'm gonna be me, I'm gonna be me until the last step, doing what I want to do kind of thing. And so it's like I feel that. Like I desire that. Like I desire to be somebody who can like obviously there's real I have to pay the bills and feed the family and
Yeah.
all that, but like to be able to do so on my accord, on my time, like I'm responsible to myself in what I do. And so just like naturally it's like, well, I want that to be music. And I think like where me and my partner live, like there's a need. There's like a
Mhm.
hole, like this sort of thing doesn't exist. I mean, there's some like 30 to 40 minutes away, depending on the direction you go, but to have something here in our community, and we also see it as something that like is separate or like differentiated from even how others do it. Like I don't know, without getting much into it, like I'm not doing it because I want to like make millions of dollars. I want to
Yeah.
do it because like I love music and I want people to have music, have access to music, to discover music and to I think have an experience. And I think that's something that like collecting physical media is like you can kind of see behind me and next to me is just like I have this collection of like 1,000 some albums that at various points in my life have meant something to me. A lot of them, come and go. There's lots that move around the rotation, but that's sort of like, I mean, that's a big part of my life and who I am. And I like sharing music and I don't know. I could like go on and on and on,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
like yeah, it's meant to be a thing that will um oh, that's where I was going. I was talking about physical music. Just like in our world that's like increasingly digital, um, and especially for people that never really knew anything beyond the digital. Like there are people that literally like grew up with iPads and phones and computers, and like I still remember what it was like pre-internet and
Yeah.
pre TV and having smartphones and everything constantly, attached to us. Like there was something about like the physical to, I tell the story a lot, but like to like bike to your local record store, like in the 60s or something. Like you've just heard Led Zeppelin dropped an album and you're like, I want to go check that out. Like, well, you'd have to go to your record store, physically pick it up, go back. And I just it spawned because like my father-in-law once told me that this literally happened to him. He biked to his local record store, picked it up. The excitement in like the
Yeah.
journey there, the excitement in the journey back and like running to the turntable to put this thing down and to like hear that for the first time like was just something that it ignited this just realization that like, man, I don't have those experiences. I
Mhm.
have just like I woke up Friday morning and hit play on my phone, but I don't
Right.
remember any of that. It just blurs with all the other screens. So like I think people are hungry for experiences, whether that's, out doing things or with physical media. And so like being able to, like I said, fill that need to be able to hopefully like help people find and discover new and interesting music, stuff that I think is just outside of, top 40 or, what you might hear on the radio or wherever you listen to music, I guess. But yeah, all that's to say it's going well. I'm excited. Hopefully sometime soon it can be a reality.
Yeah, I have to keep us posted on how to like follow the progress.
Yeah.
And I do think they were like I think there was like a desire for this too, because I was at Saturday, I was at record store day. I was there at 4:30 in the morning. I had a sleeping bag and everything because like I got to be there
Yeah.
early. I was the fourth person in line, and like by the time it opened, there was like at least 25 people in line excited, and even my students. I think there's something like communal about it because I'll put on a record and like everybody's listening to the same thing. And there's been even times where like I put on the Temptations once because I have like a beat up Temptations greatest hits and My Girl came on. And this was not prompted. Like people started singing along to My Girl. I was like, oh my, this is really cool. I was like, that's awesome. Or like I had someone like I played the Traveling Wilburys and they came up to me like, "Who is that?" I'm like, "Oh, like let me tell you who this is."
Yeah.
It's just, it's I feel like there's something communal about physical media as well that you don't really get if it's just, digital.
Yeah, no, totally. And that's, I mean, not to give too much away, but that's something that we think about and see in this being different too, is
Mm.
like, I don't exactly know what it looks like, but maybe it's something like what you do in the classroom, we just do in the store, on a weekly, nightly, whatever basis of like, oh, you guys want to do Bob Dylan for like 6 straight nights? Well, we'll play like, 3 albums a night and we'll go through his catalog or however
Yeah.
we'll do it. Like it'll be not just come buy records from us, but there'll be an aspect of like communal listening, engaging, learning, tactile
Yeah.
experience kind of thing. And then yeah, maybe buy a couple albums while you're there or
Right,
whatever. But
exactly.
like
Yeah.
still like the point is like the community more than just making money.
When we could do a whole, I mean, the probably another hour on like mental health in
Yeah.
young people and all that now where it's just like there's that lack of community, so I think that's an awesome idea for your record store, just to like bring people together and like have that common idea. I mean, you and I have never chatted like this before, but like we had this shared connection of like, hey, we love Bob, we love music, and like we've chatted for almost an hour now, and I think that shows the power of these ideas and music.
Yeah,
We could
totally.
probably do 2 more hours.
Yeah.
Um, so I want to ask you one more thing. I usually try to like
Sure.
wrap up the podcast with something kind of like unrelated and fun. But in this case, the thing that's going to be unrelated is actually related to the original part of this podcast.
Okay.
Are you at all a fan of any superhero stuff, like any superhero movies or characters?
I
And I
am.
know we're
Yeah.
around the same age, so you've been around all the MCU, the DC movies, all that. So do you have any characters that you gravitate toward?
Yeah. I do. I love all things. It's funny, there was this like very brief like rebel in me moment where like I wanted nothing to do with Marvel in like the early like 2012, like basically like Civil War era, like it
Oh
just
yeah.
felt so pervasive that I wanted to like reject it. But then I
Mhm.
very quickly realized the error in my ways and have otherwise since like obsessed over all of it and then some. I was actually just like I said, I was at Haley Williams over the weekend, which meant I was with my brother, and he's a big comic book nerd. We went to a bookstore and we're looking at comic books, and we were talking
Oh,
about like
nice.
Moon Knight and
Yeah.
um, some X-Men runs and stuff. Like I've been into like the Scarlet Witch and some of their like 80s runs even. Like I had the app, I'm forgetting, like Marvel Unlimited and like
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly.
D
Comixology. Yeah.
Yeah, stuff like that. I had those apps for a while, like during lockdown, like when everything
Mhm.
was sort of like shut
Oh,
and I
that's the
didn't really
perfect
have a
time for
ton of
that.
money.
Yeah.
So like I went deep because this was like also when like WandaVision and some of those other shows were hitting. So like I went deep into like Daredevil and Vision and I tried to do like the not as popular characters. Like I had read Batman and Spider-Man and others growing up.
Mhm.
So I was like, what did I miss? And like who are these other weird characters that are getting introduced into the MCU?
Yeah.
But like I love Loki like as a show. I love Agatha is it Agatha All Along? Is that ultimately what
Oh
it got
yeah, that was
called?
yeah, that was a good one. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm super excited for Spider-Man in like whatever 2, 3 months. I keep seeing
Yeah.
trailers when I go to the movies. Yeah, I'm stoked.
Nice. Yeah, it's I still need to watch the new Daredevil. I haven't watched the new series
Same.
yet. But
Same.
it's on my list of things. Um if I'd reckon if if you I know you love like Bob and kind of like sometimes he can be a little bit darker. I don't know if you heard the Absolute run at all of these. So
Mm,
they've done these new titles of like in DC called Absolute, where it's almost like darker takes on all the characters. So like
okay.
there's an Absolute Batman and Absolute
Ooh.
Superman, and they're all a little darker. Like there's some like I don't want to give anything away, but it's just like it's really cool takes on the characters.
Is
And
it
it's like
like if their
taken off.
like backstory had been slightly different or something? Or
Yeah,
like
exactly.
what makes it okay?
Yeah, like for like in Batman's his he still has his mom. His mom's still around, but his dad died, and that kind of had a big
Mm,
impact on him. But it's like he's more like I don't know, a bit more brutal in some of his like he's still not killing people, but he can be
interesting.
pretty rough and tumble. And like Alfred is like rather than being like a butler, is like this rugged veteran guy who's kind of advising him on the side. It's really cool.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
I also wanted to ask you to kind of like connect both of our topics here. I know that in the Watchmen series or the Watchmen movie, it features, well, in the original book, they quote Desolation Row. And then also in the movie, they had Desolation Row, but I think it was the My Chemical Romance cover.
Yeah,
Can
weirdly
you
enough.
imagine, could you imagine any character that you think would do well to have like in a movie or show to have like a like Dylan heart of the soundtrack? Feel like this is
That's
a
a good
tough
question.
one.
Yeah, like
Because you know, with like I know in a lot of like James Gunn has been really good about this in a lot of his movies where he'll like have these record, you know, these needle drop moments, and that's how a lot of
yeah.
like people got into some of these 60s and 70s people, you know, like George Harrison, My Sweet Lord was in Guardians of the Galaxy. I feel like it
Yeah.
had to be something darker though, you know?
Dang. Yeah, that's a really good question. Man, I'm trying to think of like 'cause some of the things that I like is like already kind of Dylan adjacent. I'm trying to think if there are oh like my
It's a
favorite
tough
movie, for example, is Inside Llewyn Davis, but it's like
one.
Bob Dylan is kind of in that movie, like in a
Yeah.
roundabout way. So it's like I don't want to. That feels too easy. Um, so I'm trying to like contextually think about where a Dylan song could otherwise go. Like I'm thinking of silly context. Like, I'm trying to think of like where could Wiggle Wiggle go? Like
Right.
what kids show would
Right.
Dylan show up in or something like Teletubbies or I don't know,
That
something
might
silly
work.
like that. It's like
I feel like
Wiggle Wiggle
Dirt
plays.
Dirt Road Blues is a fun song. That's a fun bop that I feel like could like I don't know maybe in some sort of like I don't know either like a lot of them could be I think Western for sure because like with Dylan's
Oh,
vibes,
for sure.
um,
Yeah.
you know, and I know with how he posts on Instagram, he loves you know that stuff as well.
Yeah, that was man, Dylan is such a weird poster. I'm guessing that it's actually him just because of how weird it is. Like if he
Weird.
has
Yeah,
some account managing intern and that's the way that they're posting, they must also be like 80 something years old, but
yeah,
it's hilarious.
yeah. It was. I don't know. I'm still thinking about it on Monday. I might see him. He just announced he might be in. He not might. He's going to be in Raleigh at the end of July. I turned to my wife and
Okay.
said, "Well, guess I might have to be in Raleigh in July."
Yeah,
But
how was the show?
oh, it was really good. I think it was what was nice about it is it was like because I've seen him at the Outlaw Festival twice, and I've seen him. This is my second time seeing him in his just show, so this is my fourth time, and he's just like it's nice having people that are there for him. I think there's more that expectation of what it's going to be like. You know, at the Outlaw show,
Yeah.
you'd have people taking out their like, what's that app where you can tell what the song is?
Like
And I'm like,
Shazam or
oh,
whatever.
yeah, Shazam. I'm like, oh, that's not going to work. Um,
Yeah.
but it was, you know, I was locked in the whole time. I loved it. The audience was really into it. It was funny at the end. You know, at the end of his shows, he usually just kind of steps out, kind of poses, marinates for a little
Hand on
bit,
hip.
and walks off. What was interesting is this time, and this is how you know you're a Dylan fan, because like any other artist, you'd be like, how is this significant? But he's posing and everyone's clapping, and he even clapped a few times. And then he left. I was like, what did it? I was like, whoa, Bob, you you're
Got a little
reciprocating?
excited there, buddy.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
but
hilarious.
it was great, and the band was all on point, so it was an awesome time, and it made me want to see him again. So
Nice. No, that's cool. That's a good point. I've only ever seen him on the Outlaw tour. I didn't really make that connection until just now. So I've only ever seen him in the context of like he's second to last act and
yeah,
that whole phenomenon of people being like, well, what is this? I've never heard this. Why does it sound
yeah,
like that? I can't hear him. I can't see him. You got
yeah,
people like getting up and moving and so it's like I've had bad experiences, but I wonder, yeah, if I went to just a Dylan show, I bet it would be a little bit more locked in. That's a good,
yeah.
I hadn't quite made that connection.
What's cool because you know they do the like they put the phones in the yonder pouches. You can't use them during it, so it's just you know you and Dylan
Right.
and you know I felt bad for this guy next to me. He was an older guy, and I think he forgot to turn off his phone, and so his phone started kind of like making a noise. It wasn't super loud, like Bob definitely didn't notice, but like he like sat on his phone. I could tell he was kind of like you know he felt embarrassed because you can't access the phone in the pouch. You just kind of have to ride it out.
Yeah.
But you know, I mean, it was fine. It was a great show and great vibes all
Nice.
around. So I'm
That's
happy I
awesome.
went. So, um, Well, I just want to appreciate. I just want to, express my appreciation for you coming on. Again,
Totally.
this is not a Dylan podcast, and this is probably a one-off thing, or maybe down the road if you want to come on again, and we can do some another deep dive. But I just appreciate you taking the chance on this random guy saying, "Hey, you want to come on my comic book podcast to talk only about Bob Dylan?"
Yeah. No, no, thank you. It's been a lot of fun. I mean, it's really only probably the second or third time I've been asked, so it's always an honor to do so. I love talking about Dylan and comic books for that matter.
Yeah. I feel like Dylan-esque in a way where it's just like, yeah, we're gonna do comics for a while, and now here's Bob Dylan. Let's just
Yep.
surprise people
Naturally.
with, some bootleg or some like, now we're gonna sing All Along the Watchtower, but entirely different. Um,
Right.
so well, I appreciate you, man, and looking forward to what comes next with the record store down the road. And you also have, I know you're not as active on the page, but you have other like I know you've done the oh my to the platform where you've done some like writing. I'm drawing a
Oh,
blank on
Substack. Yeah.
you've had a Substack as well.
Yep.
So I'd recommend everyone check you out. You're a great guy, very very smart when it comes to Dylan, and what's it? Stay cool. What was the phrase? I'm drawing a blank now. That you and
Um,
Adam used to. Oh,
oh
stay groovy or
yeah.
leave.
Be groovy or leave, man.
Yeah, exactly.
To
So
quote Dylan himself.
yeah. So I appreciate you and thanks for coming on. It's been an awesome time.
Thank you.